Hi, all. I hope you are staying well and getting stuff done at home. I thought that if we were in class right now, I would be giving you a lecture on the Gothic genre that would help you discuss the Yellow Wallpaper as well as get us ready for discussing To Kill a Mockingbird. Since we're not together, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a mini lecture, and so hopefully this will help you with discussing the Yellow Wallpaper. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen of the PowerPoint I have created. This PowerPoint is available on Blackboard under lecture notes, the Gothic genre. Okay, so first, I thought I would give you a little history of the Gothic genre. This is not to suggest that Gothic elements were not around before this, but this is when it began to organize into a genre, and that was about the 18th century in Europe as a part of the Romanticism literary movement, which was very much responding to the Age of Reason. So we began to see literature that was particularly written for women, even sometimes by women, that allowed for the existence of the supernatural. Sometimes the supernatural was not necessarily malevolent, but most of the time it ended up being evil. Perhaps the most notable novel that comes out of this period would be Frankenstein. Okay, that's kind of our quintessential European Gothic novel written by Mary Shelley, who of course was married to Percy Shelley, one of the prime romantic poets. So you can see how these things begin to blend together. Gothic literature drew on what we call the sublime or the extreme. And that is the idea that it is through extreme emotion, extreme experience that we can know truth. And so for those of you who know Gothic or even sometimes horror, that idea of the extreme emotion, through that we can know truth. You know about Gothic literature often drawing on medieval elements, but actually Gothic literature is very anti-medieval. It thinks of medieval as barbarous. There are tropes of tyranny. And perhaps those of you who watch Game of Thrones would relate to this very well. Even though it's very medieval, it's very much anti-medieval. Even those of you who were into Harry Potter, you know, we see that Gothic element coming across, even when we think of Azkaban or even of the school. We began to see a great distrust of religion. Of course, at this time, it was distrust of Catholicism, which comes out of the Spanish Inquest and things like that. But again, it just began to establish a groundwork for having a distrust of organized religion, or really any kind of organized societal institution that exercised power or influence over us. Distrust of inheritance, anything that gets passed down from generation to generation, very much anti-feudal system, that sort of thing, anti-primogeniture became a part of the Gothic literature. Pardon me. And of course, one trigger to noticing whether or not we are in the Gothic element is to notice the architecture, the castles, the cathedrals, even in sometimes just the churches or old homes or old mansions. You might think of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know that the middle of the night when you go up and you see a castle or a mansion, maybe you shouldn't go in. Music like the Hotel California by the Eagles very much represents this. And even the Haunted Mansion by Disney is very quintessential Gothic. So think about those things when we're thinking of Gothic literature. However, in the 19th century, it began to translate from Europe to America through the writings of Edgar Allan Poe. I'm sure many of you have heard of Edgar Allan Poe. He wrote very scary short stories. But when he brought it to America, he began to do something very interesting with it. And that is that he continued to allow for the supernatural, but began to blur the lines between, is it supernatural or is it the result of madness? And so we began to see these ideas of whether or not we should be, as readers, interpreting this as, is this a ghost or is the person somehow gone mad and imagining a ghost? Often, this was revived again in the 20th century, and often people consider the Gothic as the basis for most American literature, even today. Gothic blurs then the lines of Romanticism and realism, making the unbelievable believable and causing disruption for us as readers because we're not quite sure how we are supposed to be reading or interpreting or taking in this kind of art. Those of you who are familiar with Leonardo DiCaprio's Gothic work will understand what I'm saying. Is he really experiencing what he's seeing, or has he gone mad? It is therefore, by definition, what we call a subversive genre, or a genre that begins to challenge societal ideals, beliefs, and practices by using tropes such as monsters, evil spirits, madness, insanity, chaos, death, anything that reeks of these kinds of evil beings began to help us point out perhaps what is perceived as evilness, monstrousness in society. And it has historically been a popular genre for women writers because of this subversiveness, but it began to be much more popular even with marginalized writers as we went into the 20th and 21st century. So I've already gone over most of these elements, but just to quickly look through it, you would think of like evil priests, think of like Hunchback of Notre Dame, nightmares, torture, disrespect of wisdom of the past, somehow, constricting the ideas of the future, prisons, perhaps most importantly for To Kill a Mockingbird and Yellow Wallpaper, asylums, family estates. Often they have secret passages, tyranny, and often features women characters as the protagonists or antagonists, the hero or the victim of the literature. So when thinking about Yellow Wallpaper, some of you have already noticed that the opening lines set us up in an ancestral home, right? It's rented out very cheaply, and we wonder why. Now, if you were watching this in a movie, you would get this. You would be able to see immediately that this was a Gothic story, right? And it's written late 19th century, so it's drawing on the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And so we have to begin to wonder, is the narrator actually seeing women in the Yellow Wallpaper and allow for the world of the supernatural to be in our suspension of disbelief, or is she going mad? And these are the kinds of things that we start to think about when we read the Yellow Wallpaper. Now, we have to also consider, why is she there? Why is she there? And quite frankly, she's there because she is suffering from postpartum depression. And she begins to write this story. And every time she tries to break out of that depression, right, her husband says, no, you cannot do that. You must rest. It's going to weaken you, or you're going to get sick. She's not allowed to see her baby. She's kind of locked up in this room that has chains on the wall and this creepy yellow wallpaper. And so we began to think like, okay, what then is it challenging? Some of you will notice right away, it's challenging the way that women are treated in society. But take it even further, and perhaps it's even challenging the medical practice, the professionalization of doctors, the tyranny of you, if you will, of doctors, particularly on women and women having children. So I hope you have found this lecture useful. The PowerPoint is still posted on Blackboard. Good luck with the Yellow Wallpaper response, and we'll be talking much more about this when we start talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. Hope you are all well. See you later. Bye.